Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Actually, I'm going to start off with the hat this time. I don't think I've had this hat on in a video, and I only brought it out because it kind of matches the shirt. You'll see here it says Indiana Bicentennial Torch Relay. Indiana became a state in 1816. So in 2016, we had our bicentennial, and I got to be one of the torch bearers to carry a torch through all 92 Indiana counties. I got to carry it for a short distance in the county where I live. So that was really cool. And we got some neat swag, a jacket and a shirt and a ball cap. And so anyhow, that's what's going on with that. As for the pipe, I've got my my bent brandy that I made some time back. Hadn't had this guy out for a while, so I thought I'd bring him out. And need to talk about something that goes back to a previous video and a comment from a viewer. So as always, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. A little while back, I had a video, I think it was titled Two Works of Art, and I was debuting the RBC Meerschaum, a 100-year-old pipe that my friend Jeremy gave me. And my favorite piece of art by Salvador Dali, the Corpus Hypercubus. And I had a wonderful comment. So I can bring that up here. From a fellow on YouTube who goes by the name Sirius Zenith. It's Sirius Zenith. Sirius Zenith 4512. And he says, from a psychological point of view, to a large extent, our emotions create our perceptions of reality. For this reason, expressive poetry has much to offer regarding our understanding of reality. Exact sciences also provide some discoveries on the realities of the universe. However, there are aspects of the real that only God knows, and we may never find out. That's all right, because we're likely not supposed to know or understand. Corpus Hypercubus depicts this quite well. So, as always, thank you, Sirius Zenith 4512, for the comment. And like I say, this is what I love so much about the channel, is the interaction with so many wonderful people, leaving thoughtful comments, things that really do provoke thought for me, hopefully thought for the other people who read the comments, and then sometimes even prompt another episode, as this comment did. There's always been that I don't know if it's conflict necessarily, but at least the divide between what can be known through scientific methods, what can be known through the emotions, through the spirit, through art, what can be known through music, and so forth. And are those the same things? Are there certain things that can only be known in certain ways? For high schools that offer the International Baccalaureate Diploma, there's a wonderful, wonderful class. It's required for the diploma called Theory of Knowledge. And it explores exactly that, how we know what we know in different areas. So how do you know, well, a squared plus b squared equals c squared? Well, you may know that through a certain path to knowledge, right? How do you know that your mother loves you? You know that in a different way. And I do think it's an unfortunate arrogance that would lift really any particular way of knowing up above another and to the exclusion of others. And you'll see this on both sides of the equation. I think you find some people of a more poetic bent who may have little use for the sciences, and people who pursue the sciences look with disdain at those with a more poetic soul. And I'm not sure that that's really the way to go. I think there's things that could be known only in certain ways. The more ways you have of knowing, the better off you are. And not only the more you can know, but the more richly you can know. Right? There's one thing for me to know, again, how light works, how light bounces off an object, how it hits my eyeball, the physical processes of how light is analyzed and sent to the brain, and then my brain tells me, oh, I'm looking at a sunset. And then there's the experience of a sunset. Right? Those are really very different things, and I think you bring those together, much richer understanding. And Sirius Zenith's comment reminded me of a poem that a friend of mine wrote, and this has now got to be about 30 years ago. About 30 years ago. He was in graduate school with me, also in classics. We were at the University of Texas together. We were office mates. Several of us grad students, we were in an office, and, you know, our undergrad students would come to meet us there and talk about, their classes and so forth. Anyhow, this fellow, Kevin, who also turned me on, I just sitting here thinking about this, also turned me on to Kaiser Mansfield. Now, I already knew of Glenn Kaiser. Glenn Kaiser was the lead singer, was one of the singers, but lead guitarist and the founder of the really early Christian hard rock band called Resurrection Band, which eventually just became known as Res Band. What I didn't know was that at that time, I didn't know that Glenn was a huge blues artist as well. Got together with a guy named Daryl Mansfield. They released a couple of albums called under the moniker Kaiser Mansfield. And my buddy Kevin had those posters up in his room, or in our office. And I subsequently got those. One's called Slow Burn and one's called Trimmed and Burnin'. Highly recommend if you're at all a blues fan and solid blues rock. So, the moment I'm going to share with you is from that guy, my friend Kevin, who introduced me to Kaiser Mansfield as well. And let's see here. I can bring this guy up. And, of course, you know how things work. There we go. And we'll bring it up on the screen here for you as well. And he says, I stand here a barefoot preacher before the Roman architecture of your mind, dressed in my drab and ragged homespun, how I amuse myself with these pretensions of simplicity. And let me just say that I am awed by the solemn mass of this Senecan foundation. The careful grandeur of these Ciceronian columns and the soaring exactitude of this Virgilian dome. A pantheon to house the images of philosophers and poets, men who have walked among us as gods. But in this shadow I do stand, and I do dare to speak words without meaning, logos without logos. On these very steps I stand, and in blasphemy declare my kerygma, that I know how to breathe a sight, and I know how to hear a color, and there are deep places in the earth of which these stones have never even dreamed. So, let's talk about this a little bit. And I'm just now realizing late in the episode that this is actually an episode of Pipe and Verse, and I did the wrong introduction. I said Perkins Pipes. Yeah, you guys can live with that, right? This is actually a Pipe and Verse episode here on the Perkins Pipes channel. Okay. So let's look at this a little bit. It is free verse, certainly, which is actually appropriate to the content of this poem, which is a bit of a pushback against, well, Senecan Foundation, Ciceronian columns, Virgilian dome. High, even though Kevin himself is a classicist, a little bit of a pushback against classical literature in a way. So certainly the free verse is appropriate. So he starts off, I stand here a barefoot preacher before the Roman architecture of your mind, dressed in my drab and ragged homespun. So we've got the wonderful dichotomy set up where you can imagine the classic Roman architecture, right? A marble and stone and chiseled inscriptions and wonderful columns, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, all of this. And then here's this individual who doesn't even wear shoes, doesn't even wear sandals, and just a drab and ragged homespun tunic. Although, you get the fourth and fifth lines, how I amuse myself with these pretensions of simplicity. Yes, he realizes that the character in the poem, there's a little bit of a costume there too. The person who chooses to dress in drab and ragged homespun, that is also a costume. That's an intentional choice, and so he sees through himself a little bit. And then the appropriate acknowledgement. Let me just say that I am awed. It's not that he despises education. It's not that he despises fine art. He says, in fact, I am awed. And then we have a wonderful, what we talk about, a tricolon, a grouping of three. And it just absolutely beautifully done. He references the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca, the great Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero, and perhaps the greatest poet of all time, the Roman poet Virgil. And then you also did even notice that Senecan Foundation, Ciceronian columns, Virgilian dome, all three men's names have been made into adjectives, and they are the penultimate word, or the next to the last word in each of those three lines. Well, for all of his drab and ragged homespun, the character in the poem certainly knows his classical stuff. Right? He's able to speak in this way or write in this way. And you've got just exactly the sort of thing you would expect in Greek or Latin poetry or Ciceronian oratory. And, the Senecan foundation, the solid philosophical foundation, soaring Virgilian columns, and the grandeur of these Ciceronian columns and soaring exactitude of the Virgilian dome. So in other words, he's looking at another person who is obviously intelligent, who is well-educated, well-read, and presents such an edifice of learning. And he acknowledges. He says, your learning is a pantheon, right? Pantheon being Greek for all the gods, and that's one of the most famous temples in Rome is the Pantheon, the temple to all gods. He says, your education and what your mind is, it's basically a pantheon to house the images of philosophers and poets who have walked among us like gods. First half of the poem. And then comes the turn. But in this shadow, the shadow of the towering intellect, right? This massive educated edifice, I do stand. Right? I'm not going to cower. I'm not going to kneel. But I stand, and I dare to speak. Words without meaning, logos without logos. Well, of course, logos being the Greek word for word. And already you've got contradiction. What is this? This is nothing that a Seneca, nothing that a Cicero, nothing that a Virgil would have written. Words without meaning, logos without logos. My goodness, that sounds, I don't know, Eastern, perhaps, Eastern philosophical, Eastern mystical. So he sets up the contrast there. And on these very steps, right, like the steps of this edifice that you have built, he says, I stand and in blasphemy declare my kerygma. Now, what is that all about? Well, blasphemy, of course, is speaking against God. And, it would be probably blasphemous to extend that idea, right? Be blasphemous to walk into Chick-fil-A and ask to order a hamburger, right? They don't serve hamburgers at Chick-fil-A, and they're known for that, right? They're a chicken restaurant. And so I think maybe it's a little bit autobiographical for my friend Kevin, who I say is a classicist, and at that time was working on his PhD in classics. To say, here I am studying classics, and yet I rebel against some of this edifice of learning, classical learning even, and I'm going to say so. And in doing so, that is a certain blasphemy. It's a professional blasphemy. And declare my kerygma, a great Greek word there for announcement. I make my proclamation here. Now, what is that proclamation? I know how to breathe a sight. Ooh, what's going on there? Breathe, that's the sense of the nose. Sight, that's the sense of the eyes. You don't usually put that verb and that noun together. I know how to hear a color. Oh, my goodness, again, we've got the sense of the ears and then the sense of sight again. He's mixing and matching, and these are not logical things at all. And then he ends, and there are deep places in the earth of which these stones, meaning the stones of your educated edifice, have not even dreamed. So, a beautiful poem. I love it. I love it very, very much. It's meant a lot to me over the years. And I think it gets to the comment that Sirius Zenith left on that other video. There are things that can be known and perhaps only known through the natural sciences. And there are things that can only be known through an artistic or a poetic sensibility. And are some of the things that can be known one way or the other more important than others? Maybe. Maybe it is more important that you know that your mother loves you than that you know that A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Right? So talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us. What ways of knowing do you gravitate toward? Are you a logical thinker? You like to work things out mathematically, scientifically, logically? Are you more of an artistic thinker, more of a poetic thinker? It has nothing to do with you actually create art or create poetry, but that sort of a thinker. Are you a feeler more than you are a thinker? How do you know the things that you know? Would love to hear your thoughts. As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.